Vaccine eligibility opens up in two big states today as cases surge once again. Another big Facebook data breach, and what's already being called the greatest college basketball game ever. Monday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Monday, April 5th. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Bersano. Carlo, good morning, and how was your Easter?
It was very nice. It was very nice. Went up to my parents. We had a very nice time. But the big news this weekend, Jill, I am full of Pfizer antibodies. I got my first shot out in Staten Island. Shout out to the CVS on Amboy Road in Staten Island. They had their act together. It was great. It was a fabulous thing to witness. I felt great doing it. It was weird though. Last night I got a phone call from Bill Gates telling me that my headlights were on. Is that part of this?
Don't even joke about that, Carlo.
I know. No, I'm joking. But yeah, I'm feeling good. A little soreness in the arm, but small price to pay, right?
Well, Carlo, you were one of millions of people who were vaccinated
Yeah.
this weekend. The U.S. did 4 million vaccine doses on Saturday alone for the first time, bringing the daily average of shots administered up to 3 million. The White House put Johnson & Johnson in charge of a Baltimore manufacturing plant run by a contractor that spoiled 15 million doses and told AstraZeneca that it couldn't use that facility to make its vaccine. It all comes as the U.S. now in the midst of a fourth surge, cases up by about 20% in just 2 weeks. Part of the problem here are those new variants, which are much more contagious and potentially more dangerous. Hospitals across the country filling up again. I spoke to the head of a hospital in Newark, New Jersey last week. He told me that the biggest age group that he's seeing in the hospital with COVID is now the 50 to 59-year-olds, and of course, even younger than that as well. We know many seniors now fully vaccinated. Meanwhile, 60 Minutes reported last night that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis accepted a $100,000 political donation from the grocery chain Publix weeks before the state partnered with the supermarket on vaccine distribution, leading to a quote-unquote free-for-all among the state's wealthier residents. What is the significance between Publix? Is that like an upscale supermarket?
Yeah. It's the
Okay.
knock on it is that it's there's not a lot of Publix in like poorer zip codes in Florida, so it's not easy for a lot of low income Florida residents to get to one of those supermarkets. Yeah, DeSantis, for the record, calling that criticism fake news. But this is not new. Like, we sort of knew this, but the 60 Minutes report last night was sort of a bombshell because we didn't know the extent of the political donations. Meanwhile, Florida and Michigan both open up vaccine eligibility to all adults 16 and over today. So that's, especially in Michigan, that's big, just given that they're sort of the epicenter of this new surge. And the other thing, Jill, I don't think we talked about this on Friday because it happened after we were on, but the CDC put out their updated guidance for vaccinated people saying people can now travel without a test, both internationally and domestically, so long as they wear a mask in public. They do not need to quarantine. But then CDC Director Walensky, like an hour later in an interview, came out and said you still shouldn't travel. So it's just like, we've been talking about this mixed messaging, and it's just really it's starting to get really frustrating. Like, I understand there's a lot of nuance, right? And she's saying that she doesn't want people to just go out there and start flying if they don't have to. I get that. I get that this is complicated, but they got to get better about putting out a united front in terms of, like, what can you do, what should you do. It's just, there's no excuses for this anymore.
Speaking of travel, I just wanted to relay the story of my daughter's teacher, actually, who went to Israel
Hmm.
last week. And she just got home, and I called her, and I'm like, I want to know everything because
Yeah.
they, of course, have such high rates of vaccination. So I was like, what, tell me what happened. What was it like? She
Hmm.
said it is pretty much normal. Restaurants,
Yeah.
stores, beaches, all packed. She said some people are in masks, some aren't. This was really interesting, though. She said when she got off of the plane in Israel, they immediately gave her a COVID test, even though it was
Mm.
negative, and she had showed all of her papers and everything that she's fully
Right.
vaccinated. She still had to quarantine there. Um, she said police called her the next day to make sure that she was in fact home. So they followed up on
Mhm.
this. And then they wanted to actually check on her in person, but she had accidentally put the wrong city on her form. So
Right.
the police department that had contacted her went ahead and contacted the correct one, the local one for where she was actually staying. And she said they came and knocked on her door to make sure that she was
Right.
home. Then apparently there's a rule there that if you can get an antibody test that actually proves that you have antibodies above a certain level, then you don't have to quarantine anymore. So she got the test. She had really high levels of antibodies. So she was like, okay,
Uh-huh.
Pfizer, thank you. You worked. And then when she got back to the United States, I said, how was it? What was the process there? She said, literally showed them her passport and they said, "Welcome home. No COVID
Yeah.
tests, no forms." She actually said she had to fill out a form online, but then you don't send it anywhere. Like she's like, it's just on my phone. They never looked at it. They never like they never she never had to fill it actually hand it in
Yeah.
to anybody. So if we're
It's
wondering,
amazing.
are
It's
things
amazing.
any better at our airports with security and I don't know. It's just so disheartening that this country is just so dysfunctional. I don't even know what to say about it.
It's it's really amazing. I mean, it's sort of why I laugh when people get all like up in arms about the vaccine passport thing, because it's like, do you think that we're even capable of doing that? Like, are you kidding me? You think the federal government is capable of like creating some sort of like vaccination database? Like we can't even just ask people getting off planes from like COVID hotspots to quarantine. It's ridiculous.
Back to Florida, though, something to keep an eye on today, totally unrelated to COVID. A
Mhm.
reservoir holding 300 million gallons of contaminated wastewater is now on the verge of collapse in Manatee County, just south of Tampa. So, this has led to hundreds of evacuations. Crews are racing to shore up a breach in the retaining wall. Governor DeSantis declaring a state of emergency in the area. Officials are warning that a breach would cause a 20-foot wall of water to inundate the surrounding neighborhood pretty much immediately, Carlo. So, for anyone who's in
Yeah.
that area that's supposed to evacuate and isn't, um, they're really
Go.
under immediate danger if there was a breach here.
Yeah, so this reservoir holds contaminated water that's contaminated with the byproduct of phosphate mining, which is a big thing down in this part of Florida. So they say that the water is not radioactive, so I guess that's good, but it still has really high levels of stuff that you just don't want in your water, right? You don't want to be exposed to it. So they're pumping out millions of gallons a day. Still a very long way to go. So yeah, we will keep an eye on this today for those folks down there in Manatee County.
The head of the Capitol Police Union is asking Congress to ramp up security after an officer was killed on Friday when a man rammed his car into a barricade and attacked officers with a knife. Capitol Police Officer Billy Evans was killed, the second member of the force to die in the line of duty this year. Another officer was injured. The assailant was shot and killed.
This was a scary story on Friday. There was a lot of news on Friday, wasn't there? There was also the MLB pulling out the All-Star game out of Georgia. We'll talk about that a little more tomorrow. But so the suspect in this attack, identified as a 25-year-old Noah Green of Indiana. A motive is not known. Police say they don't believe it to be terrorism related. He had some stuff on his Facebook page about the Nation of Islam and Louis Farrakhan. The reporting that I've seen suggests that he was sort of suffered from paranoid delusions. So kind of just it doesn't sound like he had some sort of like political motive is what I'm trying to say. The entire Capitol has been behind fencing since January 6th. It's hard to imagine it's coming down anytime soon now, which is really it's just sad. I think, that's the people's house, and it's really just been ever since the insurrection. It's really been walled off, and you can see why. I mean, I understand. I get the threat that, especially these police officers. I mean, just imagine being a Capitol police officer the last few months. Like, it's just so disheartening. But they're heroes.
Yeah, they're saying they're desperately in need of more officers. There's like
Yeah,
200 positions that they need filled.
right.
And I guess I don't even know if it's good news, bad news. It falls into no category, but I think the thinking that this was perhaps connected in some way to the insurrection that we saw on January 6th, it's
Hmm.
looking like, as you say, that's not the case.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about when this was breaking on Friday. But yeah.
Okay, Amazon is now apologizing to a congressman for falsely claiming that its delivery drivers do not have to urinate in bottles. The company has acknowledged that drivers do sometimes have to pee in bottles, calling it a quote, long-standing industry-wide issue that it wants to solve. Amazon reps have been defending the e-commerce giant's business practices on social media as it awaits the tally of a union vote in Alabama. Um, what?
Nothing like talking about peeing in bottles on a Monday morning, right? Yeah, this has become sort of this big thing for Amazon. Look, it's from a PR standpoint, when you start to get headlines about your company and workers peeing in bottles, that's just really not good. But in Amazon's defense, it isn't just them. I mean, it's not a specific issue to Amazon. Like if you talk to anybody who drives for a living in this country, basically, whether it's a truck driver, a cab driver in New York, delivery drivers, they do pee in bottles because we have a woefully not enough bathrooms, public bathrooms in this country, right? Especially in cities like New York. So it's not a specific issue to Amazon, though it's still not good PR for them. That union vote, by the way, I would have thought that we would have gotten the results by now since it was a week ago. Still haven't. So that could, I think it'll probably come any day now. So we'll keep an eye on that for you too.
What is the holdup? Because it's only, from my understanding, it's 5,000 workers. So I
Yeah.
mean, we in most presidential years know who wins a presidential
Yeah.
election with even if you have to do a hand recount
Right.
by now. So what
I
is
don't
the?
know
Do you
for
know why
sure.
it's taking so long?
I mean, I remember that when I was in grad school and the student, what do you call that? Like when you work, when you work for the school while you're a student, you know what I mean? Anyway, we unionized as student employees, I guess. And in that case, it was like 500 people and it took a few days. So I think that there's a bunch of, when it comes to union votes, someone from the NLRB, I think, has to be on site and sort of like making sure that everything is going smoothly. But still, you're right. I mean, it's a few thousand votes. You'd think that we'd have the results by now.
I think part of the issue as well, as you say that, it might be that they have to make sure that each person who voted is actually eligible to
That's part of it
vote.
too. Yeah, and that they haven't
So
left the
perhaps
company.
that's part
Yep.
of it. It's going to be fascinating to see what winds up happening with that
Yeah,
one plant and the repercussions it could have. And
I have no
Amazon in
idea.
general, even with this whole story about the urinating in trucks, it just shows you that they are um, really not staying ahead of the PR right now. And it's bizarre because they do have a story to tell, right? They're paying $15 an hour, which is way above,
Yep.
it's double federal minimum wage. Um, and they're providing health care. Like they could be spinning this in a better light. And it's just,
Yes.
they seem to not have their messaging at all in a good place. It's kind of bizarre.
Seems to be like a company like Amazon. Pretty much the response to these stories should be like, if it was as bad as you say it is, like, why do we have people knocking down the door to come work for us? Isn't that sort of like the message that ends all debate on this issue? I guess I'm not really trying to defend them because I think some of the things that they are doing just in terms of labor, I'm not cool with. But you're right. I mean, it's a remarkable company, and there are a lot of people who love to work there and would love to work there for the fifteen
Right. I
dollars
mean,
alone.
if you, so I've listened to a few interviews with some of the people who are trying to organize the union in that Alabama plant, and they say that Amazon does this thing where as soon as you get a job in their warehouse, you have to download an app, and that lets them
Yeah,
track you the whole time that you're there. And they have
right.
this metric called time off task, where if you are doing anything, like even just running
Yeah,
to the bathroom or getting lunch or whatever it is that you're doing, that is not actually what you're paid to be doing, whether it's scanning or whatever it is, that's all kind of tallied up.
right.
So that's part of it. It's just it is fascinating, and I'm really curious to see what happens with this vote.
I think it
On
could
to
really go
the
either way. I don't know.
Yeah. On to another big tech company, Facebook. The personal data of more than 500 million Facebook users has been discovered for free on a hacking website, including the info of CEO Mark Zuckerberg. The information includes people's full names, phone numbers, email addresses, and birth dates, and it appears to be several years old. Facebook said it has found and fixed the issue, and that they did that back in 2019.
Oh, Good. Okay. Well, that helps. That goes a long way for the 500 million people whose information was hacked, right? If you have, okay, so first of all, if you have a Facebook account, it is probably now more likely than not that your phone number that you use to set up that account is just connected to your name on the internet from this hack. I mean, that's 533 million people. That is a lot of folks. But Facebook, I mean, they didn't even apologize for this. They didn't even apologize. Think about that, for this negligent. I mean, this is their fault, right? This was a negligent act that allowed this to happen. They let the personal data of like a tenth of the world's population get hacked, and they didn't even apologize for it. I think on this podcast before I've said I've compared Facebook to Philip Morris. That's actually unfair to Philip Morris. Facebook is the most dangerous company on earth, and I mean, breaking them up is like the least that we should be talking about at this point. It's just, I don't know how many more of these stories you can hear.
The thing of it is, though, is that Facebook knows from experience that nobody cares besides for you and some lawmakers and a couple of other people. And like, I can't even believe I'm going to say this. Like, I'm at the acceptance phase of my relationship with Facebook and Instagram, where I am well aware that anything that I post is not safe, that it's any privacy settings are really don't matter. Like I've just assumed, and I'm not an avid Facebook or Instagram user, but I've just assumed at this point that all of that info is already out there. And there have been more egregious data breaches with this company than this, and including what we saw in terms of the election and things like that. And that wasn't necessarily a data breach, but history has shown that the public does not care and that they want this service and they want it to be free. And so that's it. I mean, that's why they're not apologizing.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, it's sort of the same, similar to Amazon, right? It's like, and people complain about Amazon working conditions, but then they expect their Amazon package to be on their doorstep, 12 hours after they place it. Like, how do you think that happens, right? Like Facebook is a free product, as you always say. Well, guess what? You're the thing being sold.
Anyone involved in the movie theater business breathing a sigh of relief after seeing the weekend receipts for Godzilla vs. Kong. The Warner Brothers tentpole made $32 million over the weekend and $48.5 million in its first 5 days of release, which is far and away the best theatrical debut of the pandemic and way above expectations.
I was shocked by these numbers, actually. It's especially strong given that the movie is streaming on HBO Max, right? This is one of these movies that they put out day and date, meaning that it goes to theaters, but it's also free for subscribers on streaming services. So I think the question here is, what would it have made if it was exclusive to theaters? Would it have been just a couple more bucks, or would it have been significant? I don't think anybody has the answer to that. The next big fight is going to be with Black Widow. This is the big Marvel movie that's scheduled for this summer. Disney is planning to release that day and date also, meaning it'll go to theaters and on Disney Plus on the same day. Theater chain's not happy about that. Although the suggestion from Godzilla vs. King Kong, I think, is that people are itching to go back to cinemas. Those are pretty good numbers considering how many movie theaters still aren't even open or open with really big restrictions in place on attendance.
Right. I mean, and especially in New York City, and I don't know if I'm assuming this is done around the country too. So many theaters got converted into the like luxury theater with the reclining seats. Yeah. Those already only had like half of an audience, like those were already kind of limited capacity just because the seats were so big. So I can't imagine that the theaters are really able to even make money with that.
It's hard
with so few people, but definitely a sign that everyone's just like over watching movies on their couch.
Is there anything better than those big recliners where they
no, it's wonderful.
That's the best. I can't wait for that.
Even if it's just to go and take a nap. Like I mean, that's always my fear because I'm always so tired. Okay, let's talk a little basketball. For a tournament that generated some pretty big surprises, the final matchup is between the two teams that were the most dominant all along. We're, of course, talking Gonzaga and Baylor. They play tonight for the NCAA championship on the men's side. Tip-offs at 9:20 p.m. Eastern time on CBS. Gonzaga, and thank you to everyone who wrote in and told me that Carlo and I had been mispronouncing it. It is not Gonzaga. It is Gonzaga.
Really?
Gonzaga coming off a buzzer-beating overtime win against UCLA. It is already being called one of the greatest college basketball games of all time. Gonzaga point guard Jalen Suggs. Is it Suggs or Suggs?
Suggs.
Suggs.
Suggs, yeah.
Say Jalen Suggs. Yeah. Sorry. Banked in a three at the buzzer to win it. And Carlo, I have to admit that I was still kind of bitter about Michigan losing, so I could not bring myself to watch this game. And then God. I was on Twitter and I was watching the highlights, and everyone's like, greatest game of all time. And I went back, of course, and I watched the final moments. That was a three-pointer. That was from almost that was a few feet away from half court that he got it.
Yeah. Oh my good. And those pictures of the UCLA guys, just, oh my God, just heartbreaking. They thought that they were about to win. Oh God. Jalen Suggs, just absolutely incredible.
Or they at least go to a second overtime.
Yeah, exactly. This kid though, absolutely incredible. I hope that he comes to the Knicks. That's my hope for you, Mr. Suggs. Come to New York. Get the Knicks back on track. Meanwhile, Jill, in the women's, we've got ourselves a champion. Stanford last night holding off Arizona 54-53 to win their first national championship since 1992. Another great game. Arizona had upset UConn in the Final Four to play against Stanford. It was the first time two Pac-12 teams met in the title game. So props to the women at Stanford. They did it. Pretty amazing.
And Carlo, before we go, can you tell us about Lynn Murray, one of the victims of the Colorado shooting?
Sure. She's the 9 of 10 of the victims. She is the 9th of the 10 victims that we've been talking about. She was a former photo editor. She was a retiree making some cash just on the side working for Instacart. She was at that grocery store fulfilling an Instacart order when she was shot and killed. She was remembered as a hardworking and just extraordinary woman by her friends and family. There wasn't a lot of reporting on her, except that just her family and friends said that they loved her. She was great, always smiling, always happy. She was a wife of 26 years, a mother of 2. She died at the age of 61 at that King Soopers supermarket a couple weeks ago.
All right, Carlo, we're going to leave it there. That is what you need to know for Monday, April 5th.
And don't forget, guys, we did our COVID Silver Linings pod. That's in the feed. We dropped it on Friday, so if you haven't listened, it's running about 30, 35 minutes. Some good stuff in there. So write in, tell us what you think, what we missed, and yeah, check it out.